Hello there, flat earth researchers, debaters, and debunkers. No, it's not Phuket word, it's me, I'm back, and I'm talking about flat earth again, our favourite subject. Well, flat earthers are out there taking it to the next level. They're on the street, going up to members of the public and trying to use the Socratic method to make them question their assumption that the earth is a sphere. And it's all been spearheaded from this channel Beyond the Imaginary Curve, run by Dell, who hails from Paisley in Scotland. So he's a fellow countryman of mine. Well, let's just have a quick look at Dell. So this is him yesterday talking about narcissists, sociopaths and psychopaths and such like.
People who are claiming that they're real people, appeasing them. It's like Stockholm syndrome. It's like the bully running the playground and people saying things like, "Oh, I like you, it'd be nice to meet you, oh, please don't focus on me, please, 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 please." Fuck them. Stand up and point at the bully and fucking laugh at the nonsensical, weak, insecure pish that they push. They are the minority. Right? Stop acting like, oh, it's just all real nice, empathetic people who are having a debate because they're confused. That's not the reality. Right? You know in every aspect of your life that they're deliberately lying to you, propagandizing, manipulating, all over the mainstream in every aspect of your life. That's deliberate. That is a plan that is being wheeled out.
Well, Huffy Puffy, someone's cross. Well, he kind of goes on like this for about 5.5 hours about how he's not being emotional and he's not taking it personally. And he made a 43-minute rant about me last summer about how he doesn't take it personally and how he's not being emotional. Now, I was already thinking about maybe making a response to his street interviews and talking about why the things he says to people are misleading and wrong. When, lo and behold, out of the blue today, he's contacted me on one of my videos. Initially come across as quite civil, asking me again to appear on camera, even though I've told him multiple times I have no desire to appear on camera. I don't want to meet people. I don't see why I have to justify that, and I don't see that it means anything. So I just gave him a reasonably civil but frank response. And I also asked him to look at a challenge I set to flat earthers about a year ago. I don't know if he will do that. It was just basically a simple challenge that to say if the earth is flat, you should be able to take a photograph across water. And my challenge was take a photograph over a stretch of water at least 20 miles over, and you can have the camera lens within 30 feet of the level of the water, and you can take a photograph of something within 30 feet of the level of the water. It's a totally reasonable challenge, and if the earth is flat, it should be possible to do that. So I've asked him to do that. So he comes back in typical Dell style, just starts getting childish and abusive. So I just basically told him what I thought of what he did yesterday. I listened to you listing all the attributes of a narcissistic, sociopathic, toxic personality. It was hilarious, if a little disturbing. You were reading out a description of yourself. The irony was, of course, lost on you. Maybe you should look back on some of your videos, have a look at your behaviour, and try to imagine how it looks to an outsider. Now, he keeps making out that I'm a coward because I won't go on camera and I don't reveal my real name. I don't see what that's got to do with anything. It has nothing to do with my videos, what I look like, who I am, what my real name is, or what I do the rest of my life. It's nothing to do with it, and it would add nothing to my videos. Plus, on his channel, he has regulars who don't show their face. One of the guys who does the street interviews, John, as far as I know, has never gone on camera. So yeah, we'll see if Dell rises to this challenge. And I've actually said to him, if you can meet this challenge, I will appear on a discussion with you. And I'd like to suggest here where this could be done for Dell. There's a place here, southwest Scotland, you could get there quite easily from where he lives, called Port Patrick. And it's about maybe 23, 22 miles from Northern Ireland, depends where you're looking. Now, I would expect that at some points off the shore, when you go to higher ground, you might see some of the higher points in Ireland. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about standing within 30 feet of the level of the water and seeing something on the beach or a house or something you can prove is within 30 feet of the level of the water down there. Now, there's a nice little harbour that you could stand on down here if you wanted to do this. You should be able to go out there, stand there and take a photograph of the beach in Ireland. It's only about 22 miles away. I mean, if it's a clear day, it doesn't look very clear here, but on a clear day, there's absolutely no reason why you can't take a photograph of something 20 miles away. And if you look at the Irish Sea forecast, I mean, it gives you an indication of the heights of the waves in the Irish Sea. And according to this, at the moment, the highest waves aren't even 1.5 metres. And that's about less than 5 feet. So I'm given at least a 15 feet clearance of the waves. If the earth is flat, you should be able to stand here and take a photograph of the beach in Ireland. If you can't, why not? You can use any camera you want, any zoom lens. You can use a P900 they're always going on about. Anyway, if the earth was flat, I would expect that there would be thousands of images online showing things that are completely impossible on a spherical earth. People on a beach taking photographs of people on a beach 30, 40, 50 miles away. Now, where are those images? There isn't one in existence that shows that I know of. If the earth was flat, the internet would be flooded with thousands of pictures of things that are impossible on a spherical earth. You know, we're not just talking about the Chicago picture. We've all seen it, taken at Grandmere State Park, and it shows Chicago behind the horizon, mind you, still obscured by the horizon. And supposedly you shouldn't be able to see that. Well, let's go to Grandmere State Park and have a look. So here it is. There's Chicago. That's the Sears Towers about there. Grandmere State Park about 56 miles away. Now, if you go down to Grandmere State Park and look at the shore, there's what looks to me like a sand dune close to the lake. Now, if you do an elevation profile of this, you can see that the water goes from 574 feet above sea level right up to the sand dune, which reaches a height of 658 feet above sea level. So that means that the sand dune is at a height of 84 feet above the level of the lake, according to this. Now, if you were standing on top of that sand dune, the horizon under normal atmospheric conditions would be about 12 miles away, which means the distance from the horizon to Chicago would be 44 miles. Now, again, depending on conditions, that would mean you'd expect, I don't know, somewhere between about 1,100 and 1,300 feet to be obscured by the horizon, much less in certain conditions. Now, considering that the Sears Tower is 1,800 feet, and there are a lot of high buildings in Chicago. I would fully expect you would see Chicago all the time standing here. Exactly how much of it you would see, you'd have to look into, but you would see some of it. Now, why is there only one photograph showing this? Why aren't there thousands? Why haven't flat earthers gone here and reproduced this image? Why haven't they gone here and stood on the shore of the lake, right next to the water, and taken a photograph of Chicago? Where are the images? Or is the truth that flat earthers have gone there and they couldn't see it and they didn't say a thing because they're liars? Is that getting closer to the truth? Anyway, let's go back to Dell and Beyond the Imaginary Curve. I want to just talk a little bit about something that he says in a street interview. It's this thing that he keeps repeating, and I just want to talk about one thing now. I don't want to go through everything in one video that he does. It'll take too long, but I'm going to I might make other videos. Depends on the response I get to this one. So if it's worth it.
Aye. Can I ask what you're studying?
I'm studying English Studies and Politics.
English Studies and Politics. Do you understand science? Are you interested in science at all?
I'm interested in science, yeah.
So can I ask you, are you religious at all?
No, not really, no.
Religious, yeah. So is it correct that you'd be more scientific minded there? Is that right? If I says to you that the core of science for me personally is natural science, which is observable, measurable, testable, and repeatable, would you agree with that description of the core, the fundamentals of science, and that it should meet that criteria in order for it to be, relevant, as part of the natural world? It has to meet that.
Yeah, I think science has got to be measurable and an objective rather than kind of subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what that guy says is true. But let's think about this phrase that Dell keeps using: measurable, testable, repeatable. What does it mean? What is it referring to? How is he using it? And how is he using it to manipulate people? Now, also in other videos, he sometimes slips in the word scalable. He doesn't do it there, but he does it in other videos. I'm going to talk about that as well, because that's part of his deception. So I had to think about this. What is he getting at? Testable, measurable, repeatable, and all that. The way I see it is, what I think is going on is that there are two different issues here. The first issue is the criteria that have to be met in order for us to accept that there is evidence enough to accept that something is objectively real. Then there are the conditions that have to pertain in the world in order for science to be possible. Now, those aren't really the same thing. In order for us to accept that something is real, there's only really one condition that has to be met, and that is that it's observed and can be observed independently by anyone. In order for science to be real, the condition that has to be met is that if someone can do an experiment, then if someone else repeats the experiment and does the same thing, they should get the same results. Now, if that didn't happen, then science probably wouldn't have got anywhere. Now, for some reason, we live in a universe that is amenable to scientific inquiry. We don't know why that's true. There's nothing in science that explains why science is possible. It just is. But that's not necessary in order to accept that something is real, though. Now, let me give you an example. Supposing I got up one day and there was a brick floating in the middle of my living room, and I phoned up Dell from Beyond the Imaginary Curve and said, "Dell, there's a brick floating in the middle of my living room." Now, I don't think his immediate response would be, "Unless you can come round to my house and make a brick float in my living room, I'm not going to believe you." I think he'd probably say, "Okay, I'll come round and see." Now, if every scientist in the world could come around to my house and see this, and it could be documented and it'd be accepted as real, without anyone being able to repeat it or anyone even being able to explain it. Now, of course, we know the world doesn't work like that. But we don't have to be able to repeat something to accept that it's real. Now, generally, the way we do it, the way the world works, and it does seem to work like this, is if you recreate the same physical conditions that gave rise to a phenomenon, the phenomenon will happen again. And like I said, we don't really know why the world's like that, but it is like that. Now, there are lots of things that we study that are not reproducible on demand by human beings because we cannot recreate the physical conditions that give rise to them. Say, for example, the weather. We can't recreate weather. We can't recreate hurricanes. Other things like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, we can't recreate them. Lots of things in geology, mountain ranges, we can't recreate them. There are lots of things we study that we can't recreate the conditions for. Now, what we do is we wait for nature to run for us examples of these phenomena that get close to as possible to us actually being able to regard them as experiments. So we watch lots and lots of hurricanes and study the conditions under which they arise. But we don't reproduce them ourselves. So what is he getting at? Well, what he's really going on about is the phenomenon of water sticking to the earth. Well, for a start, that situation of a spherical body with a large amount of liquid water on its surface is incredibly unlikely. The universe doesn't manage to create it very often, as far as we can tell. In fact, we only know of one example, and you're standing on it. It's called the Earth. The physical conditions that give rise to that being possible are nigh on impossible to recreate. I don't think human beings could ever recreate them. Now, pouring water on a ball in your back garden like he does, let's go back to his channel. He does this thing where he goes in his back garden and shows that water won't stick to ball, just as like you wouldn't expect it to be. I mean, who would expect that to happen? No scientist would expect it. There's no reason to imagine that it would happen. Oh God, where is it? Come on, Dale, what have you done with it? Here it is.
Hello, if you're claiming the Earth is a globe, we should be able to recreate it and observe it at any scale, any level, okay? Now, where were we? So, we've done the golf ball, okay? Simple. Right, here we have a body of water, okay? We'll give it a wee bit more.
I think you can guess what happens. He takes it out and the water falls off, lo and behold. Now, he says that that should be able to work at any scale. Why? I mean, he calls it, as he says, the universe should be scalable. Now, let's get this absolutely clear. Well, for a start, the proper name for it is actually what's called scale invariance. Now, scale invariance is not something that's necessary in order to accept that something is real. If you observe a phenomenon, you don't have to be able to show that it can happen on larger and smaller scales to accept that it's real. It's not necessary for science to progress for there to be scalability. If someone can do an experiment, it's not necessary for other people to be able to not just reproduce the experiment, but to be reproduce it at any scale. That's not necessary. And it's not even a thing that we observe in the universe. The universe, generally speaking, does not display scale invariance. Scale is a factor in how we understand the world. There are some examples of scale invariance, but generally speaking, the universe does not exhibit scale invariance. If you study a system and observe how it behaves, and then you scale it up 100 times or 1,000 times, you would not expect it to behave exactly the same, but just 100 times bigger or 1,000 times bigger. The universe does not exhibit scale invariance. I'll give you a really simple example. I mean, a grasshopper. You scaled a grasshopper up to, say, the size of a dog, and you expected scale invariance. You would expect it to be able to jump over a skyscraper maybe, or something like this. I don't know the exact scales, but some huge height. Now, it wouldn't work like that, because things don't simplistically scale up and down in that way. There are lots of examples of it for different reasons that you don't get scale invariance. Take, for example, atomic physics. We know that on the subatomic level, the universe behaves totally differently than it does on the scale that we experience it at. So it's not part of science to expect there to be scale invariance. It's not necessary for science. It's not necessary to accept that something's real. It doesn't mean anything. So all he's done here, even by the standards of his own criteria that he sets out, all he's done is prove that water doesn't stick to a ball in his back garden. There's absolutely no justification for extrapolating from that to saying that water can't stick to the earth. Now, does it prove that water does stick to the earth? No, it doesn't. And let's get this clear. Even if you did get another sphere that was exactly the same size and mass as the earth, and water didn't stick to it, it still wouldn't prove that water's not sticking to the earth. It would be peculiar, and it would undermine your ability to do science, but it wouldn't prove that water's not sticking to the earth. To show water sticking to the earth, all you've got to do is show there's water sticking to the earth, i.e. demonstrate that it's a sphere. And the evidence that the earth is a sphere is completely overwhelming. I'm not going to go into I think I am going to do some more videos on this, because it just seems like this has to be reinforced again. But let's be clear about this. He has not justified this assumption at all. He has given zero justification for expecting there to be scale invariance. He's just asserted that it should be the case. He's given no argument and no evidence to expect it. So what he does here proves nothing about the earth. All it does is prove that water doesn't stick to a ball in his back garden. And, well, I think we all knew that would happen. I think none of us expect water to stick to a ball you can hold in your hand, because the mass of the ball is a factor because of the dreaded word gravity. Now, I think one of the things I'm going to do is make a video about gravity, explaining the phenomenon of gravity and why it's overwhelmingly clear that there is such a thing. And to deny the existence of it is bordering on being mentally demented. It's like denying the existence of air. But anyway, I don't like to make videos too long, so I think I'll cut this one off here. And hopefully I'll be back soon with more discussions about why Dell's wrong.